All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Thursday Talks. Today I'm joined by Douglas McCulloh, our Interim Executive Director and Senior Curator at UCR ARTS, as well as Nikolay Maslov, our Curator of Film and Media Projects. Today's talk is about the exhibition Fauxtography, Lying with Photographs, which presents an analytical framework for understanding how photographs can be induced to lie. It's an exhibition on view at the Culver Center of the Arts through July 2nd, and also exists as a website at lyingwithphotographs.com. Doug is the curator of this exhibition, so he'll walk us through this framework, and about halfway through the hour, Nikolay will moderate a Q&A portion. But before I hand it over to Doug, I want to properly introduce him as the curator of this exhibition. Douglas McCulloh has curated CMP exhibitions since 2004, including most recently, outside of photography, Facing Fire, Art, Wildfire, and The End of Nature in the New West, which is currently traveling. Doug has shown his own system-driven photo-based projects in over 250 national and international exhibitions and has publications that include 6 books and numerous catalogs. He holds an MFA from Claremont Graduate University. So now I'll hand the screen over to Doug to tell us about the exhibition.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here. I'll share my screen, the usual thing. I should just say that you can throw questions into the chat and Q&A, but we'll have hopefully a long time if I don't ramble on too much at the beginning to discuss this subject. What I will try and do in this is actually sort of tell the truth about lies. So first I will share my screen and do the usual rigmarole. Let's see here. Show. So I think it's obligatory that I ask, is this sharing? Yes, it is.
It looks great, yeah.
That's now a tradition more than anything else. This is a few installation shots of the photography exhibition that's up now. The exhibition is a subset of a much larger presence of this on the website, and the larger presence, if you're really interested in photography and lying, visit the website. You can get to it off of our CMP UCR ARTS website, as well as the URL that was given. And the exhibition is a subset of the website, and then what I'll do is a subset of a subset. So basically the subject here is how photographs can be used to lie. And clearly we're living in some kind of, golden age of lying. So I became interested maybe a few years ago in how photographs can be used to lie, but not in the broadest sense, but in the internet age, because now they can disseminate themselves, they can travel in a way that they couldn't do before. If I make a statement like the statements I'm making now, they're readily seen as an assertion, as like a claim. But photographs are presumed to be a form of evidence. They're entered as court evidence. Because we think, Susan Sontag's word, they're like stenciled off the reel. So even if they're suspect, even if we think, oh, that can't be right, they still carry this weird charge of veracity in a way that a claim of a string of words doesn't really carry. So they carry credence. And for this reason, and actually a bunch of others, photographs are like perfect building blocks in this superstructure of lies that we are sort of living in now, where everything's suspect. So all the photos, there are 7 categories that I've come up with of different ways that photographs can be used to lie. Kind of induced to lie. These are all from the internet. So this is the kind of exhibition which is not high art. These are photographs that I just fished off the internet. This is a sort of do-it-yourself exhibition. You could go out and do this yourself, which is what I did. I became sort of obsessed, and in my free time and on the weekend, I would just delve around and try and find photographs that were essentially lies and then figure out how they were working. So this is not high art, which is sort of a practice of marginal elites, but these are photos that kind of roll up their sleeves and go out and operate. This is not the whole history of photography, which has had, photographs have had a very suspect relationship with, truth or lies for their entire history. But this is just kind of the internet age. So what I'll do is walk you through these 7 categories, one example each. If you want more, look on the website, come and see the show. I also collect photo quotations and have a big photoquotations.com site. So there are quotes sprinkled out throughout the exhibition. I like the top one, David Levi-Strauss. The first question must always be, who's using this photograph and to what end? Or Errol Morris, the next one, photographs attract false beliefs the way flypaper attracts flies, which is kind of wonderful. So the exhibition, you can see the big colored bar going up where it says manufactured, is divided into these 7 categories. The first category is then manufactured. These are photographs that in some fashion or another are wholesale fabrications. They're 100% false in some way or another. And that can be a digital illustration. It can be, in this day and age, a deep fake that's like insanely convincing. Everyone I know, myself included, has been playing around in these AI image generators, and they're pretty amazing. Or it can be something as old-fashioned as staging something to photograph, which is what photo historians call fabricating to photograph. So this is a photograph of a KKK member being treated by a Black emergency room. Or so it seems. They're working to save this guy in the wake of the Black Lives Matter in 2020. This received huge circulation. In reality, what this is a staged image that was done for an Australian magazine it's like a small magazine called The Large Magazine. It no longer exists. And it was done by their art director as part of this campaign to make like an optimistic comment about how we can rise as the human race and come together. So he hired a photographer named Sean Azard to shoot this photo. He cast it all. He, set it all up. And then you'll notice it's black and white and grainy and kind of blurry. So he had all these people rock in place back and forth, and he shot available light and he used high grain film. It was a full page bleed in the magazine. For starters, the sort of film grain and blur equals veracity. You never see a photo of the Loch Ness monster or Bigfoot that's sharp and in color, because the veracity isn't there. You want grain, you want blur, you want it, and then you go, oh man, that looks so real. So that's what he did, because it was fake and he wanted it to look real. What happened is then this got loose and circulated super widely on the internet, which is kind of wonderful. So that's one example of a manufactured image. Here's an Instagram post of him explaining, the photographer explaining how he did this. Another category is not manufactured, but it's manipulated, where you take an original and you manipulate it in some way. Obviously there's Photoshop, but there's a lot of other ways you can do that. So you falsify, replace, combine, alter in some fashion. You manipulate an image. There's a great Wright Morris, photographer and writer, quote, however much photographs lie, they do so with the raw materials of truth. And so you start with something true and you mutate it. So in this case, this guy had Will Smith's face tattooed over his face. And, this is an irresistible sort of mashup of like fame and the freakish. So the photo went viral. There was this giant tempest of controversy on Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit and all over. And online sleuths traced the tattoo to this Barcelona tattoo artist I'd never heard of named Victor Chill, who apparently is famous. and has this sort of trademark style, and he pushes the boundary. So they were like, that's Victor Chill's work. It is actually Victor Chill's work, except that Victor Chill did it on someone's thigh. And another guy, this artist named Philip Kremer, he transplanted the thigh image onto a face and did just a damn good job of it. Like, it's pretty amazing as a Photoshop operation. So this is an example, a pretty weird one, but an example of a manipulated image. Another one is, this is entirely different. Errol Morris, again, the great filmmaker, said, if you want to trick someone, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, if you want to trick someone with a photograph, you don't need Photoshop. You don't need photo manipulation. All you need to do is change the caption, which is recontextualizing it. I mean, photographs essentially are these receptacles we pour meaning into, and we pour meaning into them in various ways, but a main way is language. Like, what's the caption say? What does it say? So in this case, this guy, Arnold Pointer, who's a South Australian fisherman, caught a great white and, you know, in his fishing nets, and managed to free the great white shark. But the problem now is that the great white shark follows him around. And so it's been a couple years, says the story, and she, you know, he won't leave him alone. She like follows him everywhere, and she scares all the fish off. He's named her, you know, she's 17 feet long. She named her Cindy. The photograph, this photograph, is actually a real photo and unaltered. It was made by a couple of marine biologists. The deal is that the story, oh, I'm kind of jumping ahead here. The story was actually an April Fool's story in a French fishing magazine in 2006, who made up this whole story about the fisherman who let him go, and now the shark follows him. And it's sort of irresistible. So it has had millions, it repeatedly comes back and has had millions of internet hits. You know, the shark comes up to the fisherman and rolls over on the belly and pats him and, you know, hits her fins up and down. And it's actually all from the April Fool's story in the French fishing magazine. This is actually shouldn't be in my, I'm going to skip that. Another way to recontextualize things, kind of a specialized recontextualization, is to time shift the photo. So, you know, all photographs tinker with time. They freeze it, they seize it, they save it, they stretch it. If you shift the time in a photo, when the photo was made or other ways, you shift the meaning. So this is like perfect for the internet, because the internet is nothing but this vast plane of sort of equalized moments. I mean, on the internet, everything, past, present, future, is the time is the time, only time that matters, which is now on the screen. I mean, essentially it's perfect. And photographs in the end are, you know, the content of a photo is essentially in some way time. So in this case, this is a photo of a Brazilian soldier rescuing a jaguar that had plunged into the water to escape the big rainforest fires that happened in the Amazon basin in 2019. There have been more since. And it says it right there. Again, this gets like finally, eventually, an insane amount of circulation. The photo is unaltered. And here's a more detailed version of it. But it is appropriated and time shifted. So it was made 3 years earlier. The big cat, the jaguar, is named Chiquita, and it's a mascot that was rescued because his mother was killed as a cub and then raised as sort of the mascot of a particular military outpost in Manaus in Brazil. And so they take him out swimming in the river every day. And the photographer is a Brazilian photographer who shot a whole sequence of these. So essentially, it's time shifted forward to the forest fires and then recontextualized. like the previous one. A lot of these are sort of hybrids. There's no purity in this. There's kind of like bastard versions breeding with each other. So multiple kind of my structures can be represented in one photo. Another, and we, photographers know this inside and out, is that photography is based really on omission. You're always deciding mostly what's out of the frame, and what's left out is at least as important as what's included. So, to the left, to the right, or up or down, or before or after. So the omission can be the moment. So it's the composition, it's the crop, it's the angle of view, and so on. And if you're imposing a frame, which you are, then you're imposing a framework. And so if you leave certain things out, you can distort or entirely recast the meaning. So in this example, this is Kamala Harris at an insanely scrutinized situation being sworn in. And the claim, which got insane circulation, is that she's, say different versions have different things. She couldn't place her hand on the Bible. So something was placed there. There are different versions on top of, so she wouldn't have to touch the Bible because she was too satanic in some way or another, or something like that. So it's like on a purse or a wallet or a clutch bag and so on. And the claim is this photograph, which is a certain exact low angle composition in profile. The problem, of course, for a claim like this is that, there are not many events that have more cameras from more angles aimed at them than the inauguration. So you can readily find 6 zillion other photos that, show the reality of the situation. She had 2 Bibles. So the worn Bible, the brown Bible at the bottom, is a family friend of hers who I think took care of Kamala and her sister when they were kids. And then the top one is the Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, so a symbolic Bible. So she had 2 Bibles. There's a nice quote, Thomas Ruff, the great German photographer, photography pretends. You can see, again, a paraphrase, you can see everything that's in front of the camera, but there's always something beside it. So that's kind of this extracted idea, is you're always extracting. Another one, a little more esoteric, my 6th category of these 7, I called it mirrored, but it's essentially that some photographs are like co-signed by fame. So if they portray a celebrity or spectacle or something, the mythic, the iconic, the archetypal, and so on, that they take on power by that kind of transference, and they have a special hold on us. They make irresistible claims. So here's, all of these categories, like on the website or in the exhibition, have multiple examples. These, I'm just showing you one. This photograph is the former president in his spray booth being sprayed with a peculiarly orange tan. And it was actually hacked by Anonymous, the sort of hacktivist collective that everybody knows, and released. Again, it gets circulated for a lot of obvious reasons. It, of course, is actually a staged image. There's an artist, Alison Jackson, who operates in London, who's kind of made a career of doing staged celebrity portraits. The Queen, I mean, you should check her out if you're interested, Alison Jackson. She said that for this image, she actually interviewed and vetted more than 300 potential Trumps, and then staged this image as an art piece. But her take on doing celebrities, which you'll see a wide range if you check out her website, is that they sort of set, I think her phrase is, they set 1 foot in truth, 1 foot in fantasy. But that's the idea of this sort of mirror, taking on power because it is a celebrity. And, having a celebrity or a spectacle of some kind, it lends it power. And Jackson's made a whole career out of borrowing that power. The last category, and I'm trying to keep on time. How are we doing? Not too bad. So that we have time to talk, is one that I call denied. And the idea here is that, some of these images are fabrications or distortions or deliberate falsehoods, or almost like accidental lies in some case on the internet. But another form of lying is refusing to acknowledge a truth. So if you deny something, to take a factual photograph and say that it's untrue is to lie. And this kind of, denial-based falsehood is, like, to me, brother in arms with the whole raft of irrationalisms that we see, conspiracy theories and logical fallacies and pseudoscience and false experts and all kinds of stuff like that. And the common core of all of those, and the common core of this, is that ingredient of denial of fact. So in this case, and again, these are all ones that I troll. You can find them all over the internet. These are migrants fleeing American tear gas at the Tijuana border, not too far from where I am, and I assume most of you are. So this was shot by a Reuters photographer, and there's a whole sequence of them, and other photographers are shooting the same thing. It became quite well known as a press image. He shot it as a press image, and it was circulated as a press image. But what happened is then, so there's the Reuters release of this 2018. This is during the whole caravan thing too, when, the caravans are approaching in the run up to the, or right around the election. And so what happens is that a whole group of people start claiming in very elaborate ways, and this is an example of some of it with all kinds of text, that the entire thing that he photographed was false, that everyone involved are crisis actors, and that there are multiple photographers shooting from different angles, and that it's all staged, that everyone here along the border is elaborate conspiracy. It's all a hoax. So you can see on the left, there's another cameraman posing as if fleeing. And, the whole group directly behind this, mother running with her children. She's actually from Honduras and gets interviewed afterwards. Oh my God, we had to escape the tear gas. Right behind them is, are more people posing and so forth. So there's this sort of conspiracy, it's all staged, which you hear about a lot of things, is in this case has photographic evidence. So this photo, if you go back to the original Reuters photo, is a straight up photo and out of a sequence. And then this is like, no, it's all fake. So that's a seventh category, it's denied. With that, what I'll do is stop sharing the screen, and we'll see if there are comments and questions, and Nikolay can hop back on and we can talk about this. The whole thing is pretty fun. I have to say one other quick thing, that when these Zoom things start and everybody who's participating, it floods in, it reminds me of letting cats in the morning. We keep them out of the bedroom because they crawl all over us, and they come in like a herd. So it's pretty great to see a lot of people here.
And so what I'll do too is I'll take a look at the Q&A window and see what questions are up and kind of incorporate them in the conversation. Also, if folks post in that, we could respond to them. My question is, Doug, do you remember the first time you got duped online in general?
I think I don't remember the first time, because I think being online is essentially putting yourself into a fire hose of potential dupeness. There's so many things that seem suspect. The earliest versions of things where I went, wait a second, are not images but text. Where it's just like, wait, that seems suspect. I better do a little research about that. And in some ways, that's, text makes a claim that's easier to research. I think
Right.
that photos are hard. I spent a lot of time on these particular photos, and I actually finally made a list of what, sort of debunking sites. I mean, there are well-known ones, but every major news organization in the world now has a site where they're trying to figure out, is this photo, the claim it's making, real, or is the whole thing staged, or is it deep fake, or so on. So it's a bit tough to say when you've grown up in a flood of falsehood, what was the first falsehood? I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, and now
Do
you have
yours. Do you remember one?
oh man, I think it just happened so early and so often because we first got the internet when I was 12 years old. And I
Yeah.
think when you're in that preteen, you don't know up from down anyway. I think I still barely do. So I think I also just came of age in the era where you just inherently don't trust anything you see on the internet.
Yeah.
And there's sort of two questions in the chat that are sort of connected. One is, should we assume all is propaganda until facts prove otherwise? And the other is, are Trump arrest deepfake photos the future of photojournalism? That then also kind of tie into this this question of verification, right? And maybe what are some systems of verifying?
Right.
So I'll pitch those both to you.
Okay, I'll take the first one. Should we assume that they're all propaganda until facts prove otherwise? Yeah, I think at this point in time, we're on the verge of that. You sort of have to do that. I think everything is becoming suspect, and the means of creating. I'm not sure that everything is propaganda, but everything is not necessarily what it seems. Propaganda means that it was produced with the intent to deceive, and that's not necessarily how all internet lies. I mean, that's getting subtle, but that's the difference between, misinformation and disinformation in the parlance of people who really genuinely analyze that. So disinformation is like in the propaganda category, is created with the intent to deceive. Misinformation is just gets loose. It might not have been created to deceive, but it finally ends up deceiving. So you can almost have inadvertent lies on the internet where they just get loose of their connection, which almost every photo does. That's getting a little subtle, I guess. Are the Trump arrest deep fake photos the future of photojournalism? That's marvelous. I know. I was so, as soon as like I'm gonna get arrested, and there's like these fantastically good deep fake photos from Midjourney, which I've been playing in, and I thought to myself, yeah, that is a weird kind of like it's almost like Jorge Borges writing a short story about photographs that exist to document something before it happens. I mean, we're now into a weird upside down world. So is that photojournalism at that point? I don't know. It's like pre-photojournalism or something. What do you think?
And it's interesting also how fickle this idea of the uncanny valley really was, because I remember, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was always this talk of, oh, it's going to take a long time to actually cross this uncanny valley, and sort of the closer, that things get to realism, the harder it will be. But apparently not. Apparently it's just, pretty quickly surmountable. And
I know we're here.
Yeah, we're here. And there's a lot of also folks in the AI space that are really throwing the Turing test out the window too, because it seems like it was something that sounded better on paper, but then when these systems finally arrive. And there's sort of also two related questions about verification and validation, if there's sort of any tips for evaluating the validity of a photo, or how do we, really find systems we could trust. And
yeah, that's a great question. One of the comments about the exhibition, if you come see the exhibition, there've been, it's gotten a lot of feedback in general, I think mostly of interest and positive. One critique is, hey, why isn't it also a guide to how you make sure that these photographs are valid? Or how do you tease, if this is where we are, how do you tease them apart? And that's what these questions go to. What I would say is, if you go to lyingwithphotographs.com, which has the whole giant thing, there are some little essays. The second one down, I included a giant list. Snopes was mentioned. but there are a lot. I don't know how many I have, 20 or something out of more, that are ways you can check individual photographs where BBC or, all these different agencies, the New York Times and so on, have actually spent a lot of time delving into, is it true or not? And I would check those first. Otherwise, you're going to be where I was, which is like doing an awful lot of digging around to figure out, okay, this photo that, the Russian media is now claiming was staged in Ukraine is, you can go down rabbit holes. Believe me, I spent an awful lot of time at it. So anyhow, that's kind of there's no easy way to do it. There's no easy way to do it. It takes a lot of kind of attention and horsepower. So if people are doing it for you, which you can find this list of people who are doing it, I would go there first. Yikes.
Yeah. Doing a reverse Google image search also goes a long way, because you could find if things are sort of time shifted or misattributed caption. And it's interesting too, seeing that maybe through all of this, a use case for crypto will actually come out. There is already some sort of tools that are being implemented into Adobe, and there's also a lab called the Starling Lab, which is kind of joint between USC Shoah Foundation and Stanford Engineering, that have a few use cases, and they talked about a few election cycles where they tried out a few crypto tools, essentially, where sort of, I'm going to simplify, but sort of in real time, the image is producing something on a ledger, right? And kind of producing its own system of verification that then follows it through its lifespan. And then is able to sort of track it through. And maybe, when everybody was sort of dunking on NFTs last year as this sort of, scam pyramid scheme, through this, a use case might emerge for all of this. And then the other question becomes is, at what point do we turn over verification to these systems too?
I know, which is its own problematic situation. I know the Stanford people have done amazing stuff in figuring it out, and there's a lot of software that essentially analyzes at a pixel level whether there have been modifications made, so there are ways to do it, but there are so many ways to falsify something. I mean, at that point, if you look at the photo, not a pixel's been changed, but you've time shifted it or you recontextualize it. I mean, that's not going to uncover that particular problem. I see Andrew K. Thompson, a friend, has said Tin Eyes, another picture validity checking website. That's on my list. That's a great site, actually. Yeah, it's weird because this became, for me, it's kind of an oddball obsession. This is, again, not fine art photography, my sort of photo curator bailiwick, but this is sort of photos operating in the real world in such interesting ways that are influencing everything. I mean, I don't know.
And it'll be interesting to see when sort of an equivalent moment happens of, say, when National Geographic in the 80s printed that cover where they shifted a camel slightly to fit under the.
I know, and they moved a pyramid over so that it would fit a vertical.
Right, and then that really ignited the whole storm of when is too much manipulation, and also kind of came on this cusp of these, Photoshop-like tools emerging. This was a decade before Photoshop, but we'll have sort of a similar moment where kind of there will be this kind of public reckoning, but also maybe publications and things are sort of way more decentralized now, and kind of the monoculture that grappled with these things with maybe some kind of, if not efficiency, then at the very least would be able to hold, court over a large swath of the population or of a population. Maybe those moments are also gone, and these things will be sort of hashed out in smaller communities, and through that some answers will emerge.
I guess. I don't know whether I mean, this gets to the question, a lot of these questions, how optimistic versus pessimistic should we be? There's a wonderful question here. I love these questions. In 50 years, we'll be able to distinguish fact from fiction and anything written or portrayed. That's kind of a broad, anything written or portrayed. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the written part, everything. Yeah, I don't know. What's worth saying is 50 years is a long time from now. I'm more worried about like next year, the way things are progressing. or maybe not worried, but interested in. And the other comment is that it seems really crucial to me. It's a crucial question because we live in a very visual age, in a very photo-driven age. Photographs have, in all their forms, moving, have tremendous kind of sway and power, and are sort of building blocks in how we construct our own world. I've never been to the summit of Mount Everest, but I feel like I have because I've seen so many photos of it. They're sort of an establishing component of ourselves and our political stance in the world. So we should really pay attention to that. Yeah. Oh, Stephanie Padilla, that's nice. I know the Sontag quote is actually on the wall. It's a photograph is supposed to not to evoke, but to show. That's why photographs, unlike handmade images, can count as evidence, but evidence of what? So that is actually a portion of that. It's on the wall in the exhibition. How would you answer this question? Evidence of what? Yeah, wow. Sontag sort of expanded on this. That's totally great question. Is expanded on it by observing that photographs, the meaning of photographs is very slippery, and that her phrase is they shed one meaning and take on another with alarming ease, is the Sontag, a sort of expansion of that. And in the end, the evidence of what is, man, you shouldn't really take them as evidence, is what comes out of that. So, what exactly is the evidence that photographs provide? They're so slippery that the evidence is also slippery, I think, is Sontag's ultimate goal, or ultimate kind of conclusion. I don't know.
Yeah, this whole moment seems like it's also a Rorschach test, if you will, for people's own opinions of whether we're heading towards a utopia or dystopia, or maybe their sort of views on human nature. But you can't help but notice the pervasiveness of maybe pessimism, if not stress, kind of on this moment, kind of realizing how fickle all of these things are. And some of the things we were talking about last week kind of related to this is then, how do you atone for a lie? Maybe not in this kind of grand philosophical moralistic way, but maybe kind of from how do you atone for a photographic lie, if you will? And can you ever sort of get ahead of the wildfire that spreads when one of these falsehoods gets out into the world? And is there a way to get ahead of that, maybe rectify the damage?
Yeah, and which kind of gets to the amplifying effect of the internet, because photographs have always lied. I don't go back into photo history of, I don't deal with the pyramid image, or let alone all the much earlier sort of falsehoods and stagings and lies and people adding skies from a second. With photography was essentially born whole. Almost everything that photography has done appeared in the first 10 or 20 years of photography, every single thing, including photographic falsehood. So I don't really get into that. But the point of the internet age is that a falsehood, a lie that actually has some effect or some traction, previously just wouldn't circulate. I mean, it was really hard to get it out to an audience, but now it can get out to this huge audience, including some percentage who then take it really seriously and buy it wholesale and use it to kind of build their own worldview that can really drift away from what the real world is probably like. So the amplifying effect of the internet seems like the thing. So if you're going to atone, should you be atoning because you created something, but it was really the system we live in that circulated is so widely that it had so much effect? Atone all you like, but it's already gone, it's already loose. And the fact that we live in the internet age is not really your fault. Right. If you're creating things to deceive with the intent of releasing it on the internet and trying to use that, which of course government agencies and governments do, worldwide in various ways, then maybe that's different. But
yeah, and a lot of these algorithms on whether search engines or social media, platforms, they reward engagement, aka things that stir the pot, right? And things that are often salacious or get people's blood pressure up. Those are the things that stir the pot the most. So there's a kind of reward, incentive too, right? And sometimes it's in the order of, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in clicks, engagement, whatever you want to label it as.
I know I've sort of ended up thinking at it of the whole thing with the lies that really gain traction and run wild is like Darwinism upside down. So in standard evolution, the fitter, better, sleeker animal survives, reproduces, etc. We know how evolution works. In this, like the malformed, the strange, the freakish that get clicks, they multiply. So it's kind of like a flip side of evolution. The freakish carries on. There's more questions coming in. I love all these questions. They're so good.
And there was an interesting moment today when the CEO of TikTok was testifying to Congress, and they were asking about age verification, the systems they have for age verification on TikTok and kind of social media more broadly. So one of the ways that a lot of networks and platforms do is you just type in your date of birth and you have to tick a box that you're over 18. But also what platforms like TikTok do is that they look at what you upload. So say you upload a video of yourself, and then through its own algorithms and systems, they sort of try to, assign you an age and then verify what you're doing. And TikTok's a whole separate conversation and its own implications. We won't get into that, but nonetheless, so, a lot of these systems that then begin to police other systems depend on the data you put into it. So they sort of necessitate you buying into, their own creation and buying into their utility and sort of surrendering, if you will, some data to help them grow. And that becomes also an interesting conversation about the kind of transparency of these systems. And I'll just mention that it becomes an interesting even sidebar of these big companies that are able to develop them, because we're kind of past the point where somebody in a college dorm room or a basement could develop an algorithm or a piece of software. So you need huge data. But you have instances like OpenAI, who started off as a nonprofit because the belief was that AI is so powerful, you need to make things open source, you need to have a measure of transparency. But then, as we know, OpenAI shifted from a nonprofit to a for-profit and closed their system, because they believe that this stuff is too powerful, and releasing it open source would cause a danger, right? So that kind of happened really, really quickly. And in itself, that sort of flip of theirs is worth another entire conversation. But
I know there's like a conversation in about every other sentence in this.
Yeah,
it's a big subject, and it's an important subject, really.
Yeah, it becomes maybe the answer, to some of these issues of verification, of transparency and trust become nested in these larger investigations and questions about, the role of corporations in developing these systems. Can governments police and adjudicate this? What is the overall way we're teaching even younger people in schools to get a sense of media, to get a sense of, what participating in a society means in terms of the data exchange between you and a kind of system? And how do you also then, as the world is changing so quick, what kind of frameworks, what kind of toolkits are you giving people to investigate, interrogate, and understand?
I know it's almost, you need like counter corporations whose only job is to like ferret out, what's false from what's eventually like weirdly unsettling. And I sort of feel like in The Hound of the Baskervilles, when going out into the Grimpen Mire, one step this way, you're into unknown terrain, and fall into the bog. Is that there's this sort of macro danger in some kind of way, is that if there are so many lies, photographic or otherwise, circulating, that everybody finally ends up suspecting everything, which, a lot of questions here have gone on, then that's its own danger. That then breaks down any kind of connection, commonality, trust. We already are some way toward that dystopian view of things. But so the macro grim view is that so many lies circulate that finally no one trusts anything. Any photo figures they can't really, verify any of them, and we all give up and live in our own little small worlds where everything outside is suspect. I think there are kind of societies where everybody's suspicious of anything that the government is or others are providing to them, corporations, as you say, but that seems like a pretty dystopian place to be, especially with the onslaught of AI and so forth. I mean, it's just, I can't see it going any other way than continuing down this road. It's super fascinating, but at the same time, it seems like going into a sort of weird eclipse of some kind.
Yeah, and also we're heading into another election year next year, and really we'll see a lot of maturation of these tools too, and the way that also I think the price point of a lot of these systems is coming down really quickly. Of even OpenAI charging $20 for ChatGPT, Google integrating they're into a variety of platforms. So these are going to be really cheap, really efficient tools. And can you maybe just kind of shift this towards a little bit of optimism?
I know this seems kind of bleak. We're going to lose,
Right.
Everyone's going to jump off of this thing like, man, that was pretty dark.
Can you steal that or sort of give an example of sort of lying for the greater good, or maybe lying with photography for the greater good? Is that too biggest of a question, or is?
Yeah, no, so is there, can you lie in a positive way is like the boiled down version of that. There's a classic Churchill quote, which is actually a Churchill quote. I mean, every quote on the internet is either Lincoln or Einstein or Churchill or Twain, I think. And some of them they actually said, but Churchill actually said something like this, which is, in wartime, the truth is so precious that, it should be guarded with a bodyguard of lies. So that kind of identifies a whole zone of something. So in wartime, the truth is so precious. So in this cause, in this case, defeating the Nazis in Churchill's quote, then you had to protect the truth with this bodyguard of lies, which is a classic, nice Churchillian phrase. That's where I go, well, okay, so a falsehood that is attempting to preserve something or make something happen that should happen, is that an acceptable lie? I would say that in some of the writing that I did, you can find on the website, I sort of break down the fact that there are all kinds of lies. I mean, we know this, and it's true of photographs, that so lies can be essentially harmless or benign or something, and then they start to gain a little bit of traction, and then there are just totally malign lies. And you've just slid your slider up and said, well, there's actually positive lies. I can't think of any. I didn't really go around collecting any, but I think there is a category there, and maybe I should add an 8th category, like positive lying.
In a way, it kind of is echoes the philosopher Karl Popper, his paradox of tolerance, right? In order to maintain a tolerant society, a society must retain the right to be intolerant of tolerance. Kind of something like that. Like where are those lines to be drawn?
Someone, Roger Campbell, has thrown in a comment that involves the Iwo Jima photo, which is the famous photo. The fact that on the Iwo Jima flag raising there were actually 2 photos. There's an original photo of a much smaller flag that was the first flag carried up to the top of Mount Suribachi, and the photographer Joe Rosenthal, he ended up living in San Francisco, and at one point years ago I got to meet him and took a photo of Joe Rosenthal, who took that famous photo. The one he shot was the second photo, and it wasn't so much that it was staged for the camera, or so in Rosenthal's account, and it seems to be accurate, is that, which would be kind of in my category, that would be, a falsehood like that. isn't the first flag raising, but that one of the commanders of the Marines thought that's not a big enough flag and sent a second team up. And that's when Joe Rosenthal tagged along with him and shot the photo. The end of the story is that he, of course, just sent film off, and it went off in a satchel, and suddenly he started getting messages that, wow, your photo is absolutely amazing. And he had no idea what the photo was or anything. He'd never seen it. And it's, the famous Iwo Jima photo. And has a long comment about that. If he really had been staging it, you would have been able to see everybody's face and so on. And there's actually a sequence, and it blows out a certain way. So, it's not a false photo, and it's not a staged photo. It's just kind of a weird second photo. But anyhow,
yeah,
photo trivia.
And it's interesting also to think about. I think because my background is more in film history, kind of thinking about the moment in film history in the 1950s, 60s, after coming out of World War II, where really the role of propaganda film and maybe creating, the regimes in the Soviet Union and in Germany, where we're interrogated by, the group of filmmakers coming out, and which really led to direct cinema in the US, cinema verite in Europe, where this idea of this sort of fly on the wall approach was born, where you just, with minimal manipulation, no manipulation, capture a moment to evoke some kind of truth and fact. And you mentioned Earl Morris and Werner Herzog, the sort of generation that came after really took that to task and really lambasted the kind of naivete of that, just sort of by virtue of putting a camera on a scene. You hope that truth percolates to the top. But it'll be also interesting to see if this moment will evoke some kind of also reactionary aesthetics, or maybe also give rise to new interest in shooting in maybe film or in methods that are harder to cheat or fake. Because, a lot of these trends, for better or worse, are reactionary, and you can almost sort of, pretend it's almost kind of fashion. Sometimes things get baggier, sometimes things get more form-fitted, right? You can almost kind of trend.
There could be layer after layer of this kind of thing. I read a story a couple of days ago about, Hollywood studios using, AI systems to write scripts, so you could have, GPT write the script and then use cinema verite techniques and some, AI generated video to film it and so on. So at that point, like, who's the author of that thing? It's kind of fantastic.
Yeah.
It seems the other thing this brings up, and it's a little bit tricky, is that we've been talking about lies, but if you're talking about lies, it sort of implies that the flip side of a lie is truth. And I sort of dodged this whole question of like, what is truth? There has been, like endless amount of ink spilled on the relationship between photography and truth. But no one's actually looked really at photography and lies. So I tried to limit it to the lying part. And so, by implication, it's more or less you're claiming one thing is truer, and then this is a lie or misrepresentation or distortion or recontextualization or whatever. But I try and stay away from the big T truth question. It's just like too much to deal with. It's all of philosophy or something. I can't really hang with that.
And can you maybe speak to the sort of confirmation bias that emerges? And I'm just looking at also some of the, specifically some of the things you have on the website, and specifically where it's an image and then you see the comment thread down and kind of people respond, and kind of I've noticed that there is a direct correlation between an image, real, fake, confirming somebody's preconceived beliefs and the enthusiasm with which they respond, right? There's almost, you can trend, like an image could be grainy, pixelated, like for example, the one of Obama, which is very crude, right? Him as a Black Panther, part of Black Panther, right? It's very crude. You can almost see the artifacting with the kind of sometimes.
I know there's a sort of the confirmation bias thing is kind of fantastic. So the Obama image is really quite a wonderful one, because it's Obama You have to go on the website, but it's Obama as a younger version of Obama, pre-president, obviously, but he's like actually a Black Panther. He's got a gun, he's smoking, he's with another guy. There's a Black Panther flag behind it. And it's based on an actual photo, but with Obama's head and a few other things photoshopped in, and it's pretty rough and ready. The confirmation bias, of course, these long threads where it's like, oh my God, he really is a Black Panther. And they get circulated in a million comments. They work two ways. It's not just that you buy into that because you believe that the whole kind of large area that Obama is this problematic individual in all kinds of ways, but it's also, there's the flip side version, which is whatever people you hate love, then you hate. So it's like we're two camps pushed apart, which then reinforces all of this. So everybody buys in or rejects even more vehemently. There's not just confirmation bias. I think this is true because of what I believe, but I reject that completely because of what I believe. And if you don't reject that, then I reject you too. I don't know. It's gotten pretty extreme. And there's a whole field of sociology that looks into this. Okay, here's a comment. We need photography exhibition part 2. All right, somebody get to work on this. This was a lot of work, actually totally fun, but I agree.
Yeah, and I'm just also thinking of, what this conversation would have looked like a year ago before popularization of a lot of these AI tools. And it seems like that's sort of the moment. What will it look like a year from now? What will it be like, 10 years from now? Will it be sort of a moot point?
Yeah, no, the part 2 will be entirely AI focused, right? Things are changing so fast. Part 2, part 3, part 4.
Do we have any other questions from our audience?
This has been totally great. I think this is our time, actually.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. Thank you both so much. And everyone, please come see the exhibition. It's like walking through the internet. The internet web of lies. So it's on view till July 2nd. I also posted the link in the chat. So check out the website too. And everyone have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikolay. This was fun.
This was always fun. Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Bye.